You are very, very welcome to this fifth seminar in our Trinity seminar series, Revisioning Spiritual Healthcare. My name is Jacqueline Whelan. I'm Assistant Professor of Nursing in Trinity School of Nursing and Midwifery here in Dublin. And we're delighted today to actually welcome Dr. Sara Horton-Deutsch. Sara is an academic and she has led multiple practice settings for the last 35 years, really around the areas of advanced practice, mental health. She's a teacher practitioner, she's a consultant, a program director and a caring science endowed chair, as well as a coach, and is involved in academic practice partnership as a director. So she was inducted into the Global American Holistic Nursing in 2022, and she has contributed hugely to evidence-based practice and knowledge, and the development of that throughout her entire career, really geared around towards the development of compassionate, safe, quality care. In particular, Sara has co-authored books on reflective practice in caring science, in Caritas coaching and visionary leadership. And through her journey, she has really learned the importance of connecting to one's inner source of wisdom, power and healing. So today, Sara, we are absolutely delighted to have you, and we look forward to listening to your presentation on visionary leadership, integrating caring science, spirituality and resilience in healthcare. And I would ask if anybody has any questions to please put them in the chat function, and we'll have a questions and answer session at the end. So thank you very much. So please take it away, Sara.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here with you all and have the opportunity to share my journey with you. And I invite you to, if you have a journal nearby or something you can write on, that we're going to have some reflective questions for you to think about your own journey. And because we all have our journeys through our professional lives, and learn and grow through time. And I've certainly entered the wisdom years of my career, where I hope to really give back some of what I have learned. So welcome, and I want you to begin by thinking about a visionary leader who you have had the opportunity to work with, and maybe not someone you've worked with, but someone you've read about. When you think about a visionary leader, who comes to mind? Perhaps it's one of these inspiring individuals on this slide. If you thought of someone in nursing, you might have thought of Florence Nightingale, and more broadly, you might have thought of one of our renowned world visionary leaders like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, or Gandhi. Or perhaps you thought of someone from your own country of origin. For me, I want to share with you the first visionary leader that I had the opportunity to get to know and work with. And this is Luther Christman. And he was a prominent nursing theorist who developed something called the unification model of nursing in the 1960s and 70s. And I first saw him on in a two-page spread of People's Magazine in the 1980s. And I'll never forget the issue, because Glenn Campbell was on the front of cover. And I don't know if you know who Glenn Campbell is, but he was a famous country singer, guitarist, songwriter, and actor. He was known for the song Rhinestone Cowboy, was his most favorite song. And his famous lyrics in that song were walking the streets so long, singing the same old song, where hustle's the name of the game and nice guys get washed away like the snow and the rain. And when I think of that now, I think, boy, isn't nursing on that struggle so much of the time. But that song ends with, I'm going to have the light shining on me. And I really see nurses as the shining light. And Luther was certainly my first shining light in my career. His unification model spoke about the importance of holistic approaches to care, the importance of centering all that we do around the nurse-patient relationship, that nurses should have professional autonomy, and the importance of all healthcare professionals having lifelong learning. So for this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more about what visionary leadership is and explore how we can integrate caring science, spirituality, and resilience into our leadership practices to have a more meaningful, I think, fulfilling and purpose-filled life and career, and identify strategies finally for building resilience and adaptive leadership skills. Oops. So what is visionary leadership? That sounds so impressive, doesn't it? It focuses on creating and communicating a compelling vision for the future and inspiring and motivating others to work towards achieving that vision. As educators and as healthcare leaders, we often work for stakeholders who are focused primarily on these outcomes of visionary leadership. But how do we get there? So some key aspects of visionary leadership that guide us towards that vision are to create and articulate not only the vision and communicate, but we have to communicate effectively with others. We have to be able to motivate and inspire. We have to be innovative. We have to take risks. We have to be adaptable. And we have to empower others. So overall, the literature really suggests that truly visionary leaders are not just focused on achieving the business goals of our organizations, but we're guided by a strong ethical compass, and we're committed to a higher purpose so that we can have a positive impact on society and the world. And again, these key aspects, they help us dig a little deeper into visionary leadership. But again, how do we do those things? How do we get there? So much of this is built upon relationships. And for me, beyond the unification model that Luther Christman introduced me to, I felt the need to really be a visionary leader. I needed to dig deeper. And I needed to be able to know who I was, what I stood for, and how I was going to develop those relationships. And caring science for the last decade or so has been my North Star. And caring science is, we'll talk about more in a few minutes, is grounded in a philosophy of relational care for self and others. And it's based on that moral foundation of love and compassion. It's grounded and rooted in an ethical understanding that everyone at a basic human level deserves dignity and care. And finally, it's a practice. It's a way of showing up that frames our living and our heart-centered awareness and our way of being with others. So I'm not sure how you really go deeper into caring science and have that come alive in a presentation that's very based on our cognitive skills and knowledge, unless we get into our hearts. So for those of you who haven't had the experience of being with or experiencing time with Jean Watson, I think this is the best way to do that, to listen to her beautiful words and the spiritual nature of her message, to get into our hearts and to have an experience with Dr. Watson.
Often we hear about burnout, but increasingly we learn that the burnout is not because we care too much. It's because we wall ourselves off and close off our heart and close off our very source of love. And the human connectedness that gives us the life-generating force for this work. Why are we in this field? When it often seems that we are just there to fix the body, to give physical diagnosis and treatment. Healing is much more than that. Much more of what it's about comes down to us through the ages, from our ancestors and the wisdom traditions that call us into this work. And that's about honoring our very presence, our connectedness with another person in a given moment. And it is that caring moment that actually can be a critical turning point in my life, in your life, and in another person's life, as we touch another person's humanity. What if we revisited the very foundation of our work and began to honor the deep, rich beauty of our humanity? That must again flourish. Because this is what healing is about. And what if we realize that this is sacred work? And it's sacred because we're working with the life force of another person as well as ourselves on this shared journey. What if we began to pause and to realize that maybe this one moment with this one person is the very reason we are here on earth at this time? Any health practitioner today is struggling to return to the very human depths of our work. And we know that when we are connecting with another person in this deep way, even if it's for a brief moment in time, that we have much more purpose in our life and in our work. And we know that when that's missing, there's an empty void, and we're dispirited. And we also know the same thing happens with patients. When we hold them in their wholeness, we're holding their healing for them. And we are helping to sustain them when they are most vulnerable. And as we sustain another person, we're also sustaining ourselves. This work is a spiritual practice. When we touch another person physically, we're touching more than just their body. We're touching their mind. We're touching their heart. We're touching their very soul. And when we look into the face of another person, we look into the infinity and the mystery of the human soul. And when we look into the mystery and the infinity of the human soul, it mirrors the infinity and the mystery back into our soul. And that's what connects us with this infinite field of universal love that we draw upon in our caring and healing practices. So I offer this as a blessing for you and your work in the world and in your heart as you open to the love that you have to give and to the purpose of your calling into this noble and ancient profession.
So as you can see from this beautiful video, I hope you felt connected to your heart as I do now, that it requires that we do our inner work to be a nurse, that we know our why, that we're clear on our purpose, that we can articulate the spiritual practices that sustain us, and that we're really required to practice and lead with love. So that's a tall order. So caring science asks us to tap into the deepest part of ourselves, to become more conscious and intentional in our professional being, thinking, feeling, doing, acting, leading, and ultimately loving. I wanted to bring in some historical visionary voices in nursing who I really see as visionary leaders that I feel like in the last 25 years of my career, we have moved into such an empirical way of teaching and practicing based on evidence-based practice and best practices, and moved away from that patient-centered care that really is the North Star for all that we do and should really informing our practice and how we show up with our patients and with one another. But we have beautiful historical figures who we can return to for inspiration. And I don't know if all of you know that Harriet Tubman, the African woman in the center there, was actually worked as a nurse, and she rescued over 300 people from slavery in the United States. And she was really supported by the Quaker community and protected by them at times. And I look to her as an inspiration in our own country for bringing about what is good and better in the world. And of course, we can all see Florence up in the upper left-hand corner, and the emphasis that she had on not only the head, but the heart and the hands, creating the healing environment for nursing and caring for the patient. Hildegard Peplau was an inspiration to me. She was a middle-range nursing theorist who really focused on mental health and the interpersonal relationships. She led mental health care reform and advocated for humane treatment of patients. And there's Martha Rogers in the lower right there. And who really talked about the creative, imaginative use of knowledge for human betterment. And we've just heard from Jean, our beautiful, still actively engaged nursing theorist and guiding light. And finally, your own Mary Frances Crowley, who spoke of and really elevated the status of nursing in Ireland in higher education and pursuit of excellence in the field of nursing, who called for service to humanity with compassion and care. So these are all visionary nursing leaders who brought deep care and compassion into their work. So visionary leadership through the lens of caring science really requires staying true to our values, having a sense of higher purpose or calling, committing to making a difference in the world, focusing on personal and professional growth, and engaging in reflective practice, seeking spiritual intelligence, seeing our interconnectedness with one another, and having a sense of our social and environmental responsibility. So when Jacqueline asked me to explore how can we weave caring science, spirituality, and resilience into visionary leadership, of course, Dr. Watson was my inspiration for that. And I think we really begin by understanding caring science as a philosophy, an ethic, and a practice. And it is what Dr. Watson calls through Caritas, that's that love and care together, a form of care that embraces and speaks of love. So again, the three foundational roots of caring science are the philosophy, that it's a philosophy grounded in our relationship with ourselves and others, that it's an ethic, and we'll see Levinas here. Her work is really grounded in Emmanuel Levinas's philosophical works of the ethic of belonging, and seeing that we are all connected and all lives matter. And then what's so beautiful about Dr. Watson's theory is she includes the practice of caring science as a roadmap that frames how we live from a heart-centered awareness and how we show up as leaders. And she talks about Caritas, that love and care together. It invites really a total transformation of self and systems. In this model of caring science, the changes occur not only from outer focus on systems, from that deep inner place within us, the creativity of our human spirit. Here is where the deep humanity, the individual heart, and the consciousness of caregivers evolves and connects to provide exceptional care through transpersonal caring relationship. Jean goes on to identify the 10 Caritas processes of how we attend to our showing up each day. And this applies to us as practitioners and leaders, that we first embrace loving kindness for ourselves. Until we genuinely care for ourselves, we cannot genuinely care for others. So I ask you to reflect on how you show up and care for yourself each day, and do you show up and care for yourself each day? And if you're not caring for yourself each day through some rituals and practices, we invite you to do so. The second Caritas process invites us to inspire faith and hope. Being a visionary caring science leader requires that we're really authentically present with ourselves and others, that we enable faith and hope and belief, that we honor our unique inner life and the world of others. One of my roles as the program director for a master's leadership program is to work with my students who are sort of in that middle management. They're caught between the organization and the system and the CNO, the chief nursing officer level leadership, and then the nurses that they work with. And I asked them what they needed from their leadership most during COVID-19. And they said what they needed from their leaderships most was presence, that they wished their leaders were there and were there to authentically listen to them and what they were going through. And what they missed most during that time was when their leaders weren't present. So the importance of presence cannot be underestimated as leaders. The third process is building trust, being sensitive to self and others, and cultivating our own spiritual practice. It's really, really difficult to be sensitive to others when we're not in a heart-centered space ourselves. I know on a day when I'm rushed and I'm hurried and I'm out the door, I'm not as patient with others or those I interact with during the day if I don't take time to ground and center myself. So it's an important aspect of leadership that we ground and center ourselves so that we can be authentically present, but also be sensitive to others and be thoughtful before we respond. Caritas process number 4 is that nurturing the relationship and building that trusting, caring relationships. It's really hard to get others to follow us as leaders if they don't trust us. And we know that building trusting, caring relationships takes time. Holding space, allowing for the others to share their positive and negative feelings is an important part of leadership, that those who work with us know that they can authentically share and that we are willing to non-judgmentally listen to them. It doesn't mean that we stay in that negative space, but that we allow people to meet us where they are and they feel safe in doing so. Caritas process number 6 invites us to use our creativity as leaders, to look for creative problem solving through the use of the Caritas processes, to use our artistry, to use an everyday term, to think outside the box, to solve problems, to think beyond the rigid policies and procedures in our organizations and systems, because we know in times of change, oftentimes we need to create innovative responses. I never forget when someone once said to me, evidence-based practice is the best of past practice and the death of innovation. So we need to, in times of turbulence and change, we need to be able to use our creative sense of self and innovate. Visionary leaders who practice through the lens of caring science are clear on their roles to teach and mentor, and not work from an authoritative space. We co-create caring, healing environments with others, and we really inspire others and encourage them to find their own leadership practices and journeys, and we bring other people along. So we create an environment where it's safe for others to become the best they can be as well. We sustain human dignity and help find humanity in all that we do. So it's important that we bring in body, mind, and spirit into our practice as leadership. And then finally, that we remain open. This is a tall order, but for each of these processes, there are micro practices that we can engage in to help us live by and continue to follow the Caritas processes. And so micro practices may seem very small and almost insignificant at times, but they can make such a difference, and they're within our sphere of control. And so much in healthcare and what's changing right now is not within our control, but the micro practices that we engage in. So what are micro practices? And these are just small and yet powerful ways that we can connect with ourselves. At Children's Hospital Colorado, they have signs outside each patient's door that say "Pause to Care," that remind the nurses to pause, take a breath, let go of what came before, to be fully present, and to truly, genuinely show up and see each patient in their wholeness. A simple practice of pausing to care. In the Visionary Leadership book, we talk about pause, purpose, presence, and peace. Again, that we pause between each interaction during our day. We reflect on our purpose. What is our purpose in this next person that we connect with? Can we remain focused on our purpose for being there? Can we be fully present with the other person? And then finally, can we be at peace at the end of the interaction, that we were able to do what we could, whether for a patient or a nurse or a colleague, that we did the best that we could with the resources that we had in that moment, and be at peace so that we can move on to the next part of our day. So we have micro practices are threaded throughout the caring science literature and in textbooks. So finding micro practices that work for you to help you remain connected to the Caritas processes are an important part of living caring science leadership in your day-to-day life. I want to share with you some research on caring science leadership, and this is a doctoral dissertation study by Grisel Hernandez, and Grisel interviewed leaders who try to practice through the lens of caring science, and what she discovered is that they're really clear on integrating an in-depth knowledge and understanding of caring science into their day-to-day practices in order to repattern the field, that they engage their hearts by understanding that they can be the healing environment. They can walk into that next meeting and know that they can bring positive energy and that their energy matters. And so how can you be that engaging positive energy when you walk into a meeting? We've all walked into meetings where we can already feel the energy is negative and we want to turn around and leave. So how can we help to repattern that field? And there's days when we won't be able to, let's be honest. There's days when we're not feeling it. But on those days, I say, how can I not bring negative energy, but I can at least bring neutral energy into this space? But whenever possible, be that caring, healing environment, bring positive energy into all that I do. And finally, engage their hands by creating physical spaces and caring, healing environments. So within the hospitals settings that I work with, many of the hospitals have meditation rooms or contemplation rooms, or at least little closets or spaces where nurses can go and reconnect, being cognizant of the physical environment. How many spaces do we have in clinical and our office spaces that are cluttered and dusty with old books or supplies? And caring science invites us to reconnect to our physical environment and make our physical environment a caring, healing space for ourselves and others. And then as Grisel went deeper into her work, she really was able to align the three main practices, or the Caritas processes that the leaders spoke up, really aligned with three of the Caritas processes. And those leaders practice through the lens of caring science leadership by co-creating, working with their nurses, having an unyielding trust that people are able, and enabling her nurses to lead and be autonomous and empowering them by using Caritas process number 7 to develop allies and build collaborative relationships, to not be an authoritating leader, but to be a partner in leadership and to teach and mentor. And then finally, Caritas process number 6, seizing the opportunity to push that door open, to step in and be creative together. So the intersection of caring science and spirituality and visionary leadership, where does spirituality come in all this? I'm sure you've already sensed the thread of spirituality through this already, but more specifically, spirituality really is beyond any one religious tradition, but it also involves our personal experiences and our perspectives. It's about our sense of self-transcendence, how we find inner peace, interconnectedness with others in the universe. This has been explored, but it's really clear that when we bring our spirituality into leadership, that we are clear on our values, that we're clear on our sense of purpose. We have a sense of wholeness and integration, that we have a transcendent perspective, that we as leaders can help see beyond the immediate challenges and connect with our sense of meaning, that we can have purpose and awareness, that we're clear on our ethical foundation and what drives us, and that, again, we foster that connection and that sense of community. Overall, I think literature with spirituality and leadership suggests that integrating spirituality into leadership can foster a more holistic, values-driven, and purpose-centered approach that really benefits individuals and organizations. So it's important to take a moment to think about, what does spirituality mean to you? And what does it include for you? And how do you take time for spirituality in your life? What more can you do? And finally, why does it matter? Jean guides us into the spiritual realm through caring science by offering these beautiful sutras. And sutras, as many of you know, are ancient Hindu teachings. And the meaning is the thread or the string. They were written before we had written texts, and they're brief because they were shared and passed on verbally. So Jean offers us these sutras to get started, and she invites us to think of our own sutras as well. But they are brief prayers and practices that help us to point to our truth, words that help us to stop our mind, to open to mystery and the awe, to connect to our gratitude. And they're really important, I think, to move beyond our thinking mind and to drop deeper into our sense of knowing, to connect to our wisdom and our words. For me, to really take time with these practices, I need a quiet space. I often play soft music, maybe light a candle. Some days I go and take a walk and I be in nature and just experience that sense of awe. But all of these sutras helped us to then expand our caring consciousness. So with the 10 Caritas processes and the sutras and the meditative practices, they all help us to practice from a spiritual essence and bring that into our leadership, to be more conscious of what we're doing. And then one other example I wanted to share with you is the Caritas Leadership Program. And this is a 6-month program that Dr. Watson and my colleague Chris Griffin and I developed during COVID-19. We were seeing that not only were nurses at the bedside being torn apart by what was happening and what they were witnessing and feeling completely devastated, but also the leaders were hurting just as deeply, feeling caught between administration and the nurses they were called to care for. And we knew that they needed something more. And so we developed the Caritas Leadership Program during COVID-19 and created this online program that's for 6 months, and it meets 4 hours a month for 6 months, and on Zoom. We do it on Zoom just like we are, and it's guided by what we call Caritas, loving, caring circles. And so during our time together over this 6 months, we meet with intention. We share from our hearts, and we have deeper reflections with one another, and we close at the end of the time. We do bring in expert Caritas leaders for part of the time, and then the rest of the time we hold circles and with one another, where we contemplate some themes each month, and in our circle time we are guided by agreements. And the agreements that we use in our circles are really based on the 10 Caritas processes, that we agree to all show up and be authentically present, put away our cell phones, allow for compassionate listening. We allow for the expression of positive and negative feelings, speak with intention, and trust and learn from silence. So why the Caritas Leadership Program? We really, again, did this knowing that nurses and healthcare professionals are the heart of our system, that burnout is widespread, and that burnout really is a spiritual crisis, and that our system needs ways to respond to support nurses in their roles, and that this program would invite leaders to reconnect with their sacred purpose and to heal, to regenerate, and renew. And so I want to share with you the sutras that thread through the Caritas Leadership Program. And the first is authenticity. In month 1, we encourage nurses to be their authentic selves, and we practice showing up as our authentic self and reflecting on the mask that we wear to work, the mask that we wear to school each day, and what would happen if we took those masks off and be our authentic self. Here's another visionary leader, Howard Thurman, who talks about the sound of the genuine. And I don't know if you know Howard Thurman, but he was an influential African-American theologian and philosopher and civil rights leader. He was actually Martin Luther King's mentor. And he says, there is within every person something that awaits and listens for the sound of the genuine in herself. There is in you something that awaits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. You are the only you. If you cannot hear the sound of the genuine, you will never find whatever it is for which you're searching. And if you hear it and you don't follow it, it were better that you never were born. You are the only you that has ever lived. Your idiom is the only idiom of its kind in all existence. And if you cannot hear the sound of the genuine in you, you will all of your life spend your days on the strings of someone else's pull. I'm going to read that again. And if you cannot hear the sound of the genuine in you, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that someone else pulls. What an inspiration to be our authentic selves. So in month 2, the thread that we follow is compassionate listening. We engage in how to listen to one another more authentically. We study a little bit of Thich Nhat Hanh's work on compassionate listening and the spiritual practice of compassionate listening, to be fully present for another. Then in month 4, we focus on connection and belonging. And this is a time of how do we connect with ourselves, but create an environment where others feel like they belong as well. And this is where we really connect really directly with caring science's foundational philosophical perspective that built again on Emmanuel Levinas. The face speaks to me and thereby invites me to a relation incommensurate with a power exercised, be it enjoyment or knowledge. But it's about seeing the face of the other person, to hearing the other person's story, to seeing the other person's humanity, and that all lives matter. Then in the next month 4, we focus on sacred space and holding space, and these are the components of creating a safe and sacred space. And we build on Heather Platt, who is a scholar from Canada, her work on the art of holding space. And we talk about how we hold space for others, staying aware of the wholeness of the person, ourselves, and the other, seeing the spirit-filled entity that they are, and being able to mirror back there the uniqueness in their beauty, and paying attention to all parts of the person beyond what we can see. The 5th month focuses on communitas, so it's about building a sense of community, relationships within community. And finally, the last month is on sacred activism. So when I say about building communitas, it's that collective care. Sean Jenwright, a psychologist from the Bay Area in San Francisco, talks about collective care, and he talks about care as the individual care, the relational care, and finally institutional care. So I think the communitas is where we bring those together. We bring together the individual, the relational, institutional care, and we invite our institutions to reflect on what is their responsibility to care for us. We know that we have a responsibility to care for ourselves and relationships with one another, but also what are institutions' responsibility? And finally, this last month is sacred activism, to speak of our global covenant to humanity, to see human caring, healing, health, and wholeness as threaded through all that we do. And so folks that have attended our program, I love this quote by Gay Landstrom, a CNO of Trinity Health System in the Midwestern parts of the United States. In the end of it, she just says, "I no longer looking at how we are going to pull together, but instead how we're going to do things differently." So it's about how we're going to show up differently for one another. And one of the educators says how this program has really helped them to listen authentically and to model a way for others. I'm going to move on so that we have time for questions. But to really lead through the lens of caring science, what we have found is that when we can do that, we can enhance nurses' job satisfaction. We can have more meaningful connections. We as leaders can promote self-care. We facilitate personal growth. We provide a framework for processing difficult situations and discussions. We foster a positive work environment. And we emphasize the importance of human connection. And we do this by starting with our own selves, just like the program does. We start with ourselves and begin to connect with others, and then move out in community, and finally move through taking on the entire system and organization, and coming back to the wholeness of one and moving circularly around. And it's an iterative process. These are some of the leadership micro practices. We talked about micro practices for the Caritas processes and of nursing. But as leaders, we can be welcoming. We can check in with those that we work with. We can listen with intention, be kind, respond to others, and through open questioning, and remind ourselves when the going gets tough that we don't close off, but we turn to wonder. We attend to our own inner teacher, connect to our own inner selves and inner wisdom, and we speak our truth. In closing, I think it's important that we move beyond sustainability. So much of what's going on in healthcare isn't sustainable, but it's regenerative. And how do we become more regenerative? And I think caring science reminds us that it's these iterative practices, these regenerative iterative practices that feed us and feed those that we're called to work for. So in closing, visionary and caring science leadership is a holistic approach. It prioritizes care, it's transformative vision, it's empowering, it's innovative and adaptable. It focuses on healing and well-being, and finally, lifelong learning and growth. So with that, I'm going to close and stop my share here and come back to Jacqueline and see if you all have any questions or comments, and just thank you for your time and attention. I'm really grateful.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that fabulous presentation and for the inspiration and the knowledge and the evidence that you've actually shared with us. We're very, very grateful for that. And in particular for clearly demonstrating to us, I suppose, what visionary leadership actually looks like through the lens of caring science and, dare I say, spirituality. So in many respects, I suppose caring science could be viewed sometimes, as Jean says, as sacred science. I'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think caring science is sacred. It is spiritual. It's a spiritual practice. And so, when you asked me to talk about caring science, spirituality, and resilience, it's interesting because I find if I work from a framework of caring science, the spirituality and the resilience are automatically folded in that, right? We're in a crisis in the United States right now about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how do we address that? And I find, because some of these words are so polarizing, but I find when we talk about caring science, we're addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion because we're seeing all of humanity and looking at each individual individually and seeing them. So there is something very spiritual. I think Jean would say caring science is a spiritual practice. And so I'm hoping that our talk today helped shine a light on some of that it is very spiritual. Yeah.
That's great. We have a question from Rachel Kennedy, and she states that risk aversion is pervasive in healthcare and can directly impact on individual nursing practices. As a nurse manager, how can I navigate the challenge of integrating caring science while being cognizant of adhering to sometimes restrictive organizational policies? Now, that's a big question.
That is a fabulous question. And, I often say I don't ask for permission, I ask for forgiveness in some of these things. And I think when we think about the innovative spirit of caring science, and again, I'm drawn on the quote, evidence-based practice, or the policies that we're called to follow are the best of past practice, but the death of innovation. And as leaders, we are sometimes called to innovate. So what I do is I draw upon my inner knowledge and wisdom. Jean also says, information does not necessarily need to lead to knowledge, and knowledge does not necessarily lead to wisdom. And so what I say to you, Rachel, is it takes courage, and we really are called to be courageous and sort of ask for forgiveness if we fall too far out of line, but to follow these policies and procedures the best we can. But at times we have to depart that text, right? We have to depart that text in situations. And I have a close group of leaders that I partner with in these decisions. And I try to always say, I want to go out on a limb here. Do I have your support? How can we do this? Let's figure out a way. And it takes creativity. I think it takes and courage. Maya Angelou says, if you don't have courage, all the other virtues don't matter, because they will all fall the wayside if you don't have courage. So you're going to have to find your courage, Rachel. We're all going to have to find our courage right now. So very good question. And do it together. I always take my people with me. Maya Angelou also says, when you go into that room, when you're doing something, take your ancestors with you, take your best friends, take those you trust, take those that you know you have your back, whether they're with you literally or figuratively, take all those people with you. That will give you courage.
Mm, mm, mm. And I suppose also as well, Sarah, being conscious of the kind of energy that you bring into the room, the authenticity, the genuineness that Thurman talks about. I mean, I've never come across his work. That's fabulous. I'm going to have to actually read that up and source that text from the library, because I think it's going to make for very, very fascinating reading. I suppose it's just more another comment, maybe a question also as well. I loved your comment about evidence-based practice being the death of innovation. I just thought, I was like, wow, it's like a light bulb moment, because in many respects it is. So I'm just wondering, what are your views on how we can best develop, I suppose, innovative thinking in our leaders, clinicians, and also our students?
That is such a good question. I'm going to first say Michael Bly is a nurse leader in the United States, and he's the one that I want to give him credit for saying that. I heard him say that. He never wrote that anywhere that I found, but he said that. I think this is so important. That's where it's the holistic perspective, right? It's bringing the mind, body, and the spirit into all that we do. And I think when we think of evidence-based practice, Jean asks us to move to the language of evidence-informed practice, that it's not just evidence-based, but it's evidence-informed. And that's a little bit broader term that incites us to think about what counts as evidence. And there are things beyond empiricism that count as evidence. Our intuition counts as evidence. Our personal experiences count as evidence. The patient's experience counts as evidence. Our ethics and our code of ethics count as evidence. So I think by opening up what counts as evidence and taking that into our practice is a way to move beyond sort of this narrow view of evidence-based practice that I think we have universally fallen into over the last 20 to 25 years. And in the United States, we're being called back to rethink about nursing education and put what they call outside of the caring science community effective learning, which is that spiritual knowing, that spiritual learning, that heart-centered learning back into nursing education. And what happened when we took that out, we found out in COVID-19 that our nurses did not have something to fall back on to sustain them, that deep sense of knowing, purpose, and meaning. That's what holds us and sustains us, that allows us to surrender when we need to surrender. If we don't teach that and we don't mentor that to our students along the way, they get into practice and they don't have that to fall back on during times of crisis. So I think that we're at a time in nursing history where we need to bring back some of our historical nursing perspectives that had all the answers that we let go of. I look at Luther's unification model and I'm like, where did that go? He was talking about that in the 60s and 70s, and we let that go, right? Academic practice partnerships are a really, really important part of bringing this work back together. Yeah.
Sure, Florence was a visionary in her own right. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that she spoke about, and she was also a highly spiritual person, has really sort of come to the fore in terms of also, I suppose, current practices and holism and so forth. So it's about people reading more about her work. Rachel actually has sent us a response, and she says, "Thank you. I'm going to dig deep for my courage, and I have wonderful people in my sphere," which is great to hear.
Good. Yes, that's wonderful to hear. And utilize them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one final, I suppose, question, Sarah, is that you did mention that burnout can be equated to a spiritual crisis. Would you like to comment any more on that?
Yeah, well, I am not an expert in that, but I think Stephen Wright is
Yes,
someone I would refer you to. But I think when we feel burned out, it's a state of absolutely being lost from our purpose, not knowing why we're here, what we're doing. We feel like we can't go on. Getting out of bed every day, it is is a chore. And so we really do have a spiritual crisis. We lose a sense of oftentimes we're experiencing burnout, we're not clear on our purpose. We feel a little bit lost. We don't have that guiding light in front of us anymore, or maybe that light has dimmed. And so whenever we're feeling, and it's so hard because when we're stressed and we're overwhelmed, we want to narrow, we want to focus, we want to close off, but that's when we need to open up and we need to go in and we need to deepen. And so I have gotten better over the last few years of when I'm starting to feel stressed out, I say, okay, Sarah, it's not time to shut down and close off. It's time to open up and go in and look for that sense of spiritual healing that I need in order to reconnect to my why. So yeah, but I refer you to Stephen. Go to Stephen Wright. He's amazing.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I suppose lastly, really, I think the micro practices linked to caring signs are just fabulous in terms of helping people to center themselves more and to think about how they can be still, particularly if they're working in very chaotic environments, to try and help themselves. So I loved the 4 Ps, and I certainly will be using those in class for students. Cause and purpose, being present and trying finding peace at what you actually did or what you tried to accomplish on behalf of another. So I think that's a great mantra for helping us to develop, I suppose, leadership in our students, and also to develop a vision of what it is that they need to be doing. So thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your expert insights with us today. We are very, very grateful, and hopefully we'll see you again very, very soon.
Oh, it would be my honor and pleasure. I'm so grateful for our time together today. Thank you all, and I wish everyone the best, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I let everybody go now. And thank you, everybody, for actually coming to the session today. Oh, actually, just before we finish, I would just like to share my screen, if it might come up here for you. So I would just like to advise you, we're having our 8th International Spirituality and Healthcare Conference on Thursday, the 6th of June. And we are being joined by some fabulous people from around the planet. So we have Professor Melanie Rogers, who's she's a PhD in spirituality and advanced practice, and she'll be looking at the whole area of resilience with us. And Dr. Stephen Costello is a philosopher and existential analyst by profession. He's a logotherapist also as well, and he'll be looking at the philosophical aspects of resilience. And then we have Porrick Hurley, who's based in the Southeastern Technological University in Waterford, and he'll be looking at contemplative practices really around developing resilience within healthcare. And then Dr. Austin L. Osta, he is the director of SCARU, which is the first self-care unit, academic unit on the planet also as well. And he's based in the Imperial College in London, and he'll be talking about self-care, and they've developed a theoretical model really around that. And then we're very lucky to have Dr. Dominic Vachon, who's been writing around this area for the last 30 years. So he'll be sharing his insights with us. And Professor Cinda Hilda Rushton is from Baltimore, and she will be looking at the whole area of moral distress. And she has written very, very widely on that whole area. And then you may also be familiar with Professor Michael West. He's the author of the seminal report, Courage to Compassion, and he'll be looking at ways and means that we can actually develop resilience from organizational and also self-care perspectives. And then finally, we have Professor Mary Jo Kreutzer, and Mary Jo is from Minnesota, and she is the director of Spiritual Healing Center, Vulcan Healing Center in the USA, and she has published widely in this whole area, and she will be developing obviously insights for all of us about how we can actually take better care of ourselves. So I think following kind of the post-COVID era, it's important that we look at this aspect of care so that we can actually help ourselves to self-care more effectively. So that's all I'm going to say on that. So thank you all very much for joining our session today, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. We will be running another webinar series next year, probably the same time frame from January right through to May, and we'll get that I suppose the whole area of the theme that we're going to adopt for next year. We have yet to decide that, but once we do, we'll put it up on our events page so you can have a look at it there, and then we will be emailing people when we have it all set up. So thank you very much for joining us, and we really appreciate your time. And thank you, Sarah, finally. And also thank you to Jenny for facilitating the session as well. We wouldn't be able to run them without Jenny's expertise. So thank you.
Thank you.
Care.
Thank you, Jenny.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Jacqueline.